Welcome to Fragile Bonds, to the powerful stories of family, love, loss, and the choices that shape our lives. Now let's begin today's story.
On an autumn afternoon, Emily Harrison sat at her laptop in the living room of her single-family home in suburban Massachusetts. Emily worked from home as a freelance writer while also caring for her 5-year-old son, Ryan. Outside the window, colorful trees swayed in the wind, announcing autumn's arrival in the quiet residential neighborhood. Her husband Michael worked as a director at a major marketing firm and had recently been assigned a big project that required frequent business trips. Emily sometimes felt lonely, but she understood and supported him, knowing how much pride he took in his work. Ryan had just come home from kindergarten and was playing with toy cars on the living room carpet. Emily would occasionally pause her work to check on her son. Every time she saw Ryan smile, she realized how precious this small family was to her. However, deep in Emily's heart, there was a wound that had never healed. 10 years ago, she had lost her beloved father to pancreatic cancer. The battle lasted less than a year from diagnosis. The helplessness she felt watching her father grow weaker day by day was still deeply etched in her heart. Especially during the last few months, she had mentally collapsed and couldn't do anything. After her father's death, Emily had been afraid to form deep connections with anyone for a long time. The thought that she never wanted to lose someone precious to illness again had taken over her heart. She met Michael during the period when she was trying to emerge from that dark tunnel. Even after learning about Emily's past, he never left her, slowly melting her heart over time. Sometimes when Emily cried looking at her father's photograph, Michael would simply stay by her side without saying anything. One evening when Emily was crying alone on her father's death anniversary, Michael gently embraced her and said, "It's okay, I'm here." He might not have known how much those words meant to Emily. Recently, Emily had been feeling that Michael seemed a bit tired. At dinner one evening, she asked her husband, "Has work been tough lately?" Michael thought for a moment before answering, "Yeah, a little. But I'm okay." His smile was the same as always, but something bothered Emily. However, Michael treasured his time with family, and when playing with Ryan, he fully embraced his role as a father. Ryan loved his daddy too, and whenever Michael came home, he would always run to the door to greet him. One weekend, the three of them went to a nearby park. In the refreshing October air, Ryan enjoyed playing on the swings and sliding down the slide. Watching from a bench, Emily looked at Michael's profile and felt a bit worried. His face showed signs of fatigue, but when Ryan approached, he displayed a bright smile. "Don't push yourself too hard," Emily said. Michael squeezed her hand and answered, "I'm okay." The warmth of his hand reassured Emily. At dusk, the three walked home hand in hand. Michael gave Ryan a piggyback ride, and Ryan laughed happily. Emily watched the scene and wished this peaceful daily life would continue forever. The autumn sunset stretched their shadows long, casting gentle light over the quiet residential neighborhood. However, Emily didn't know yet that this peaceful daily life would soon be greatly shaken. That a heavy burden no one noticed had been placed on her 5-year-old son's small shoulders. That behind her husband's kind smile, a deep secret was hidden. That night, before getting into bed, Emily looked at her father's photograph displayed on the bedroom shelf. Her father's peaceful smile seemed to be saying something. Emily sighed softly and gazed at Michael's sleeping face beside her. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Emily gently wiped it away with a towel and adjusted the blanket. Michael let out a small groan but didn't wake up. Emily turned off the light and stared at the ceiling in the darkness. A small anxiety was sprouting in her heart, but she tried to shake it off. "He's probably just tired from work." Telling herself this, Emily slowly fell asleep. On Monday morning, while drinking coffee, Michael told Emily, "I'm going on a business trip next week for 3 days." Emily turned around while preparing breakfast. "Again? You've been going a lot lately." Michael put down his cup and looked a bit apologetic. "It's a big project, and there's a final meeting with the client." Emily felt a bit lonely but understood her husband's dedication to his work. Michael always put family first, but at the same time, he was someone who approached work seriously. "I understand. Take care," Emily said with a smile. There was no particular reason to be suspicious. Business trips weren't unusual at Michael's company, and he had always been an honest and sincere husband. However, that week, Emily began to notice changes in her son's behavior. Ryan, who was usually bright and energetic, seemed somehow less spirited. Even when he came home from kindergarten, he talked less excitedly about his play than before. One afternoon, Emily sat next to Ryan in the living room and spoke to him gently. "Ryan, is kindergarten fun?" Ryan held a building block in his hand and remained silent for a while. Then he answered, "Yes," in a small voice, but his expression was dark. Emily thought as she stroked her son's head. Maybe he's lonely because daddy's away on business trips so much. For a 5-year-old child, having his father frequently away from home would be a source of anxiety. Emily hugged her son and said gently, "Daddy will be home soon." That night at dinner, Ryan stared intently at Michael. As Michael was eating soup, Ryan suddenly asked, "Daddy, where are you going?" Michael paused for a moment with his spoon. Then he smiled at his son. "To work, Ryan. Daddy's going to work." Ryan opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but ended up saying nothing and fell silent. Emily watched this, but thought it was just typical childish moodiness. The night before his business trip, Michael was packing his suitcase in the bedroom. Emily sat on the bed watching her husband. Michael's hands folding shirts seemed a bit more awkward than usual. "Have a safe trip," Emily said. Michael turned around and replied, "I'll be back soon." Emily stood up, approached her husband, and embraced him. Michael's body felt a bit thinner than before. Michael hugged Emily back tightly. The embrace lasted longer than usual, as if confirming something. Emily looked up at her husband. "What's wrong?" Michael started to say something for a moment, but stopped. Then he smiled gently. "Nothing. I love you, Emily." Those words carried a weight different from usual. Emily felt a small sense of unease deep in her chest but didn't know what it meant. "I love you too," Emily answered and hugged her husband once more. The next morning, the sky was clear blue without a single cloud. Emily and Ryan decided to take Michael to the airport. When getting into the car, Ryan was quieter than usual. Seeing her son in the back seat, Emily worried again but said nothing. As the car left the residential area and entered the main road, Michael remained silent. Looking at her husband's profile as he stared straight ahead in the passenger seat, Emily spoke up. "Are you okay?" Michael turned around as if slightly surprised and answered, "Yeah, I'm just a little tired." His voice lacked energy. Emily thought about turning on the radio but decided against it. A heavy silence filled the car. Looking at Ryan in the rearview mirror, she saw her son staring intently at his father's back. That serious gaze made Emily's heart uneasy. As they approached the airport, she felt Michael's breathing becoming somewhat labored. Emily took her husband's hand. "Are you really okay? You're not pushing yourself too hard?" Michael squeezed her hand back and repeated, "I'm okay." But his hand felt cold and seemed to be trembling slightly. Stopping the car in front of the airport departure terminal, Michael took a deep breath. Emily turned off the engine and looked at her husband. Michael put his hand on the car door but didn't open it right away. It was as if he was trying to make some kind of decision. Ryan leaned forward from the back seat. "Daddy." Michael turned around and looked at his son. There was something in his eyes that seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he just smiled. "Be a good boy, Ryan." Michael finally got out of the car. He took his suitcase from the trunk and turned toward Emily. Emily also got out of the car and stood in front of her husband. "Take care. Call right away if anything happens." Michael nodded and hugged Emily once more. That embrace was stronger than the morning one, as if it were a final farewell. "Have a safe trip," Emily waved her hand. Michael pulled his suitcase and began walking toward the airport entrance. Emily was about to return to the car. That's when it happened. From the back seat, she heard Ryan's small voice. "Mommy." Emily turned around. Ryan was looking at his mother with a serious expression. Then, in a calm tone uncharacteristic of a 5-year-old child, he said, "Mommy, you should follow Daddy." Emily froze. "What? What do you mean, Ryan?" She couldn't understand the meaning of her son's words. Ryan looked out the window and pointed at his father's back. "Daddy's going somewhere different." Emily's heart began to pound wildly. "Ryan, what are you saying? What do you know?" However, Ryan didn't answer and just kept staring at Michael. On that small face floated a serious expression unsuited to his age. Emily was confused. What was her 5-year-old son saying? How could he know something about her husband? But seeing Ryan's serious gaze, Emily intuitively sensed that something significant was happening. Michael was still walking toward the airport entrance. Emily hurried back to the driver's seat and moved the car to the parking lot. She parked the car in a place with a good view of the airport entrance and turned off the engine. "Ryan, wait here," Emily said. However, Ryan shook his head. "Let's watch together, Mommy." The two watched the airport entrance with bated breath. Michael slowly approached the entrance, pulling his suitcase. Emily's hands were trembling. She prayed in her heart. She hoped Ryan's words were wrong. That her husband would simply board the plane and go on his business trip. But the next moment, the scene Emily witnessed shook her world. Michael stopped in front of the airport entrance. Then he turned around. As if checking whether anyone was watching, he looked around. Emily held her breath. And Michael didn't enter the airport. He changed direction, still pulling his suitcase. He began walking toward the airport taxi stand. Emily watched the scene in disbelief. This must be some mistake. But her husband's figure was certainly heading toward the taxi stand. "Mommy, follow him." She heard Ryan's voice. Emily started the engine with trembling hands. Michael got into a taxi. The yellow taxi started moving. Emily took a deep breath and began following that taxi. Her heart pounded wildly, and sweat beaded on her palms. "Where are you going, Michael? What are you hiding? Who are you?" The taxi left the airport and began driving toward the city center. Emily desperately kept her eyes on that yellow car. The taxi proceeded along the main road and eventually entered the city center. Emily continued driving, keeping an appropriate distance while desperately tracking the yellow vehicle. Her hands were shaking and her throat was dry, but she couldn't take her eyes off the taxi. Looking at Ryan in the rearview mirror, she saw her son sitting quietly. On that small face was a calmness uncharacteristic of a 5-year-old. "Ryan, how did you know Daddy wouldn't board the plane?" Emily asked while driving. Ryan paused before answering. "Daddy does this every time. He gets in a taxi." Emily's heart nearly stopped. "Every time? What does that mean?" Ryan continued while looking out the window. "Remember before, when I went to the airport with Daddy? I watched then too. Daddy didn't board the plane." Emily tried to process her son's words. So Michael had been lying about business trips and going somewhere else all along. Why? For what purpose? Various possibilities raced through her mind. An affair. Debt. Crime. But Michael wasn't that kind of person. Emily trusted the husband she had lived with for nearly 10 years. The taxi turned left on a main street and eventually entered a quiet district. Emily continued the pursuit, being careful not to close the distance too much. Ryan, did you notice anything else? About Daddy? Ryan thought for a moment before answering. Daddy gets up in the middle of the night. I heard him throwing up in the bathroom. Emily gasped. And there were lots of medicines in Daddy's room. He hides them in the back of the shelf, but I found them. Tears nearly spilled from Emily's eyes. How much had her son been carrying alone? A 5-year-old child had been living each day while keeping his father's secret. Ryan, that must have been hard. Why didn't you tell me? Ryan answered in a small voice. Daddy said not to tell Mommy. He said it would make you sad. But I thought it was reaching the limit. Because Daddy got so thin. Emily wiped her tears. She had to keep looking ahead. The taxi continued driving slowly. After about 15 minutes of driving, the taxi began to slow down. Emily also reduced speed. Then, seeing where the taxi stopped, Emily was speechless. It was a large hospital. St. Margaret General Hospital. A huge white building loomed before them. Emily parked the car some distance away and turned off the engine. Her hands were shaking so much she couldn't grip the steering wheel firmly. A hospital. Michael had come to a hospital. Lying about a business trip to come to a hospital. In Emily's mind, various fragments of memory began connecting. Her husband's tired expression. His thinning body. The disturbances in the middle of the night. Everything pointed to one terrifying possibility. Michael got out of the taxi. Pulling his suitcase, he was walking toward the hospital's main entrance. Emily got out of the car. Ryan, can you wait here for a moment? But Ryan shook his head. I'll go with you. I'm worried about you being alone, Mommy. Emily looked at her son. On that small face floated a strong will to support his mother. Okay, let's go together. Emily took Ryan's hand, and the two headed toward the hospital. The automatic doors opened, and the smell of disinfectant hit her nose. Emily's heart continued to pound wildly. There were several patients and visitors in the spacious lobby. Emily searched for Michael's figure. Michael was standing in front of the reception counter. He was talking with a receptionist. Emily and Ryan hid behind a pillar and watched. The receptionist confirmed something and handed Michael some documents. Michael looked over the documents and nodded. Then he began walking toward the elevator hall. Emily pulled her son's hand and followed Michael. Walking while blending into the crowd, maintaining distance. Michael got into an elevator. Emily rushed into the adjacent elevator. She stared at the floor indicator of the elevator Michael had taken. 2nd floor, 3rd floor. It stopped at the 3rd floor. Emily picked up Ryan and pressed the button in their elevator. 3rd floor. As the elevator ascended, Emily's heart felt like it would burst. What department was on the 3rd floor? Why had her husband come to the hospital? The doors opened. The moment she stepped onto the 3rd floor hallway, Emily saw the signage posted on the wall and her entire body froze. Oncology. That word pierced Emily's heart. Oncology. Cancer. The disease that took her father. The word Emily feared most. No, it's different. Not Michael. He's healthy. Maybe it's just a routine checkup. Maybe he's visiting an acquaintance. Emily desperately tried to deny it. But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. Down the hallway, she could see Michael's back. He sat on a bench in front of an examination room, waiting his turn. The suitcase was placed at his feet. Michael covered his face with both hands and breathed deeply. That figure looked like a soldier heading into battle. Emily approached her husband step by step. Gripping Ryan's hand, she walked down the hallway. Trying not to make footsteps, but steadily moving forward. 5 meters. 4 meters. 3 meters. Emily stood behind Michael. Then, with a trembling voice, she called her husband's name. Michael. Michael turned around as if jumping. Shock colored his face. Emily. Why, how are you here? Emily asked while holding back tears. What are you doing? Here. What are you hiding? Michael was speechless. He opened his mouth but no voice came out. In his eyes floated fear, regret, and deep sadness. At that moment, the examination room door opened. A middle-aged male doctor in a white coat looked out. Michael Harrison. Michael tried to stand but his legs stumbled. The doctor saw Emily and Ryan and understood the situation. Your wife and child. Please, come in together. Emily entered the examination room, still gripping Ryan's hand. Michael sat weakly in a chair. The doctor looked around at the three of them and said quietly, I understand the situation. You need to talk as a family. On the examination room walls were posted diagrams of the human body and photographs of medical equipment. On the desk lay a thick file. On the file's cover was written the name Michael Harrison. The doctor looked at Emily. Ma'am, didn't you know about Michael's condition? Emily shook her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I don't know. Nothing. The doctor sighed deeply and looked at Michael. Mr. Harrison, it's time to talk. Your family has the right to know the truth. Michael raised his face. Tears overflowed in his eyes. And finally, he opened his mouth. Emily, I'm sorry. 3 months ago, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Emily's world crumbled. Pancreatic cancer. The same disease as her father. The nightmare she feared most had become reality. Michael continued. His voice was trembling. Stage 4. Surgery isn't possible anymore. Life expectancy is 6 months to a year. Emily collapsed into a chair. Ryan clung to his mother. A heavy silence filled the examination room. Emily sat in the chair, unable to look at her husband. Her hands clasped in her lap just trembled slightly. The doctor quietly stood up and headed for the door. I'll give you some time. Please talk slowly. With those words, he left the examination room. Only the three of them remained. Michael took a deep breath. Then he slowly began to speak. 3 months ago, they found an abnormality in a health checkup. At first, I thought it was just stomach trouble. But when I had a detailed examination, they found a tumor in my pancreas. By that point, it had already progressed quite far. Emily raised her face. Tears overflowed in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? We're husband and wife. Shouldn't we have faced this together? Michael closed his eyes painfully. I couldn't tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. Emily shook her head. You didn't want to hurt me, but in the end. Michael stood up from his chair and walked to the window. Looking outside, he began speaking quietly. I remember when your father passed away. I watched you then all along. Emily's breathing stopped. Michael continued. From when he was given the diagnosis, your father grew weaker day by day. And you broke down along with him. You cried every night, couldn't swallow food, couldn't sleep. In your father's hospital room, all you could do was hold his hand. I saw how much that helplessness tormented you. Emily's memories came flooding back. Her father lying in the hospital bed. His body growing thinner day by day. In the last few weeks, her father couldn't even speak anymore. He could only weakly squeeze Emily's hand in return. And one morning, that hand was cold. Michael turned around and looked at Emily. After you lost your father, you couldn't recover for a long time. Even when you met me, the wound still hadn't healed. You said it, didn't you? That you never wanted to lose someone precious to illness again. Emily covered her face with both hands. Tears wouldn't stop. Michael slowly approached her, knelt down, and met her eyes. So I didn't want to make you go through that suffering. From when I received my diagnosis until I die, I couldn't bear for you to spend every day in fear and anxiety. But, Emily said while crying. But that's not for you to decide. It's not something you decide alone. Michael nodded. I know. But I didn't have the courage. The courage to watch the light disappear from your eyes. Michael stood up and looked at the window again. I wanted to spend the little time I had left with a smile. With you and Ryan. As a normal family. Going to the park, eating dinner together, sleeping side by side at night. I wanted to treasure those ordinary days until the end. Not spending every day with a dark face thinking about illness. Emily asked with a trembling voice. But the symptoms? How have you been feeling? Michael laughed quietly. The first month, I was still okay. But starting the second month, pain began. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and throw up in the bathroom. I lost nearly 20 pounds. But I desperately tried to keep smiling in front of you. Ryan said in a small voice. I knew. Michael and Emily both looked at their son simultaneously. Ryan continued with tears welling up. I heard Daddy throwing up in the bathroom at night. I was worried and went to check, and Daddy looked like he was suffering so much. Michael rushed to his son and embraced him. Ryan, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to see. I didn't want to worry you. Ryan buried his face in his father's chest. But you know, Daddy. I was more worried. Watching you suffer alone. Emily's heart felt like it would tear apart at her son's words. Ryan, what else did you know? Ryan looked up. I found Daddy's medicine. Hidden in the back of the shelf. Lots of medicine. And I also saw Daddy secretly checking hospital appointments. He said business trip, but I figured out he was really going to the hospital. Michael stroked his son's hair. Ryan, you've been carrying all that alone. Ryan nodded. Daddy said to keep it secret from Mommy. He said Mommy lost her father and was sad, so she'd be sad again. So I stayed quiet. But, Ryan continued. Daddy kept getting thinner. Piggyback rides got lighter than before. And your smile stopped being a real smile. I could tell Daddy was pushing himself. I thought if things kept going like this, Daddy would break. Emily pulled her son close. Ryan, it must have been so hard. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't notice. Ryan cried against his mother's chest. I was scared. That Daddy might disappear. But I was more scared that Daddy was suffering alone. Michael approached the two and the three family members embraced. Only the sound of three people crying echoed in the examination room. After a while, Emily raised her face. Wiping her tears, she asked Michael. Treatment? Isn't there any way? Michael shook his head. According to the doctor, it's past the stage where surgery is possible. Chemotherapy would have limited life-extending effects too. Rather, it might just reduce the quality of the time I have left. Then, Emily's words caught. Then, how much longer? Michael took a deep breath. 6 months to a year. But looking at how my symptoms have been progressing recently, it might be sooner. Emily felt tears about to overflow again but desperately held them back. Then she gripped her husband's hand tightly. Michael, listen. It's true that when I lost my father, I nearly broke. But you're different. You're my husband and Ryan's father. We're a family. We should have walked together until the end. Michael looked into his wife's eyes. But I didn't want to make you suffer. Emily shook her head. Sharing suffering is what family does. Not carrying it alone. The fact that you were suffering alone, that's what hurts the most. Ryan came between the two. Daddy, Mommy. We'll always be together. When Daddy's suffering, when he's sad, we'll be by your side. Michael hugged his son. Ryan, thank you. You're truly brave. The doctor knocked and returned to the examination room. Have you finished talking? Michael nodded. Yes. No more secrets. I'll spend the remaining time with my family. The doctor smiled gently. That's the best choice. We can also arrange home hospice care. We'll support you so you can spend time with your family at home while controlling the pain. Emily stood up. Please. Please do everything possible so my husband doesn't suffer. The doctor nodded and began preparing the necessary paperwork. The three left the hospital. Walking to the parking lot, Michael pulled his suitcase. He didn't need to pretend about business trips anymore. He didn't need to lie anymore. Getting into the car, Emily held her husband's hand. How do you want to spend the time from now on? Michael thought for a moment before answering. I want to live normally. Treasuring each day with you two. Laughing, talking, being together. Ryan said from the back seat. Then today let's eat Daddy's favorite pizza. Michael turned around and looked at his son. On his face appeared a genuine smile for the first time in a long while. Sounds good, Ryan. A family pizza party. Emily started the engine. The tears hadn't dried yet, but a small light was kindled in her heart. The remaining time was short. But they could share that time as three. Emily understood that was the most important thing. The car left the hospital and began driving toward home. After that, Michael retired from his company and, while receiving home hospice care, treasured the time he spent with his family. Emily reduced her work and chose to stay by her husband's side. When Ryan came home from kindergarten, he would always rush into his father's room. The first 2 months were still relatively peaceful. The three would take walks in the neighborhood, watch movies in the living room, and cook dinner together. Michael endured the pain while genuinely enjoying time with his family. Emily captured her husband's smiles in photographs, and Ryan drew pictures of the days he spent with his father. However, entering the 3rd month, Michael's condition deteriorated rapidly. Walking became difficult, and the time he spent in bed increased. The pain grew stronger, and the amount of medicine prescribed by the doctor increased. Still, whenever Emily and Ryan came to his room, Michael always smiled. One night, Emily sat by Michael's pillow. Michael said in a weak voice, "Emily, I have regrets. I should have told you the truth sooner." Emily held her husband's hand. Just being together now is enough. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I was happy to spend time with you too. I was truly happy. 4 months later, in the early morning, Michael quietly passed away. Emily and Ryan were holding both his hands. Morning sunlight streamed into the room, and gentle light illuminated Michael's face. His expression looked as if he had fallen into peaceful sleep. Many people came to the funeral. Michael's colleagues, friends, neighbors. Everyone spoke of Michael's kindness and integrity. Emily shed tears while feeling proud that her husband had been loved by so many people. 1 year later in autumn, Emily and Ryan were at the neighborhood park. Ryan, now 6 years old, was energetically playing on the playground equipment. He had a slightly more mature expression than before, but hadn't lost his childlike smile. Emily, sitting on a bench, took out a small photo frame from her bag. Inside was a photograph from the day the three of them came to the park. That day when Michael had looked a bit tired. But he was certainly smiling happily. Ryan came running and sat next to Emily. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" Emily placed her hand on her son's chest. "Here. He's always in Ryan's heart. Ryan put his hand on his own chest. Really? Emily nodded. Yes, forever together. Ryan looked up at the sky. Is Daddy watching? Emily also looked up. In the clear blue autumn sky, white clouds drifted slowly. He's watching, surely. Daddy's so happy seeing you play energetically. Emily put her arm around Ryan's shoulder. Thank you so much for telling me the truth about Daddy then. If it weren't for you, we couldn't have spent that last time together. Ryan looked up at his mother. Daddy was happy, wasn't he? Emily wiped her tears. Yes, very much so. Daddy said he was happy to be with us until the end. The two held hands and began walking the park path. The leaves on the trees were changing color, and the autumn breeze blew gently. Emily realized this. The sadness won't disappear. But those last days spent with Michael had become an irreplaceable treasure. Because they could share the truth instead of lies, they could truly face the end as a family. Ryan suddenly stopped and said, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to become a doctor. I want to help sick people. Emily looked at her son in surprise. Ryan continued with a serious expression. I want to become a doctor who can help people suffering like Daddy. Emily hugged her son. Yes, I'm sure Daddy would be happy too. Ryan nodded in his mother's arms. The two began walking again. Facing forward, step by step. While carrying sadness, toward the future. Because Michael's love would live forever in their hearts.